Hello and welcome back to the Shakey Sonnet Show. I am Tootight Lautrec, the drag laureate of the Sonnetarium, and here we are once again in the Sonnetarium at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainder section of an unnamed local library which may or may not have a couple of lions on the front steps couchanting all over the place after a long, hard night of music and dancing and carousing and who knows what. Well, I think we all know what. Couchant, then, is a fitting posture for looking at the next two sonnets, sonnets 128 and 129. That's right. Now, I'll not waste any time with prefaces or falderall of any sort. We'll jump right into it with sonnet 128. But before I do, I'm just going to link a short video that explains the harmonium or the virginal, which is the instrument that is supposedly the beloved is supposed to be playing in Sonnet 128. So you can link that below and you can look at that before or after the video, just so you know what sort of an instrument we're talking about. Sonnet 128. How oft when thou, my music placed, upon that blessed wood whose motion sounds with thy sweet fingers, when thou gently sway'st the wiry concord that mine ear confounds, do I envy those jacks that nimble leap to kiss the tendered inward of thy hand, whilst my poor lips, which should that harvest reap, at the wood's boldness by thee blushing stand. To be so tickled, they would change their state and situation with those dancing chips, o'er whom thy fingers walk with gentle gait, making dead wood more blessed than living lips. Since saucy jacks so happy are in this, give them thy fingers, me thy lips to kiss. So, as I said, you can look at the video about the virginal or the harmonium to see what kind of an instrument this is talking about, but we'll jump right into it. And it starts out beautifully. How oft when thou, my music, my beloved, he's calling his beloved his music, and then he says his beloved plays music. How oft when thou, my music placed. And since we're talking about music, it sounds like it's a party, and we might as well have a cocktail party vocabulary word, because when you have music twice like that, it's called antistasis or antistasis or antistasis. I looked it up earlier, but I forgot how to actually pronounce it. It's also called antinedasis, and I can't pronounce that either. But it's a rhetorical term for the repetition of a word or a phrase in a different or contrary sense. So, when thou, my music placed, antistasis. As the sirens go off. So, how often, and the first two quatrains are actually one sentence, so it's a bit of a run-on sentence. How oft when thou, my music placed, upon that blessed wood, the harmonium, whose motion sounds with thy sweet fingers, when thou gently sway'st the wiry concord that mine ear confounds. And confounds actually just means amazes, pleases or amazes. And then the sentence continues in quatrain 2. How oft when you play music do I envy those jacks? And jacks are the actual wooden chips that make the sound on the harmonium or the virginal. And yes, you can make any supposition about virginal and all of its meanings however you choose, because I think Shakespeare is a very deft fellow when he chooses his instruments. So when you play music, how often do I envy those jacks that nimble leap to kiss the tendered inward of thy hand, whilst my poor lips, which should that harvest reap, meaning touching the inward of her hand, or his hand, it's not clear, At the wood's boldness by thee blushing stands. My lips blush, red and swollen, thinking about those pieces of wood touching the inward of your hand. And now this idea of saying, I wish that I were those wooden chips that are touching your hand, is a convention in a lot of poetry where the lover imagines or envies an inanimate object touched by the beloved. And we'll get to sauciness as we go further on down into the couplet, but the sauciest example of this idea of a lover envying an inanimate object, wishing that it could be close to the beloved as the inanimate object, the sauciest example is from Barnaby Barnes's Parthenophile and Parthenophae in Sonnet 66, where he wishes he were his beloved's urine. Originally, he starts out wanting to be the wine that his mistress drinks, and then he wants to be the wine his mistress drinks, quote, which down her throat does trickle, to kiss her lips and lie next her heart, run through her veins, and pass by pleasure's part. So that's the sauciest example of this wishing to be close to or to become an inanimate object that is as close to the beloved as the inanimate object is. And some people think that Shakespeare is kind of mocking this tradition, but I would say Barnaby Barnes's example is much more mocking, and Shakespeare seems to be embodying it fully and not even really questioning the cliche. He's using it to its full force as only Shakespeare can. So he's bending it to his own purposes. Maybe a little clunkily, but still, he's using it, I think, pretty well. So I wish my lips were blocks of wood that touched your wrist and apparently, or the palm. Apparently, I forget which of I think Burroughs says that the paddling of palms is somehow to share a quasi-sexual intimacy. So, but you can understand that this is an erogenous zone, and you can understand how someone would want to kiss the inner part of a palm or a wrist. And if that's your kink, go with it. Then we get to the third quatrain. So my lips are blushing, wishing that they were the pieces of wood. To be so tickled, they would change their state and situation with those dancing chips, o'er whom thy fingers walk with gentle gait, making dead wood more blessed than living lips. So it's just a repetition of what's been said in the first two quatrains, or the first octet as we heard it. And then we get to the couplet. Since saucy jacks, and as I said, jacks are the pieces of wood on the virginal or the harmonium, but also saucy jacks could be sexy, lusty, high-spirited knaves who are all about town. Those are also called jacks. Since saucy jacks so happy are in this, give them thy fingers, me thy lips to kiss. Move the hand out of the way, give me your lips. Which to me is a very joyful ending. It's quite saucy indeed to even jump to that, to maybe a new beloved, and it's quite forward, but I think it's also quite cute. So we go from Sonnet 128, the paddling of palms, the kissing of palms, the kissing of a wrist, to the kissing of lips, to Sonnet 129, which is a corker. Sonnet 129. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action, and till action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, enjoyed no sooner but despised straight, past reason hunted and no sooner had, past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad, mad in pursuit, and in possession so, had, having, and in quest to have, extreme, a bliss in proof, and proved a very woe, before, a joy proposed, behind, a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. Boom. We go from envying inanimate objects to wishing to kiss a palm, paddling palms, kissing the palm, kissing the wrist, kissing the lips, to full-fledged, raging lust. And I'm all here for it. This is one of my favorite sonnets because it's vivid, it's clear, it delves deeply into the fascinating, troubling workings of lust that plagues both body and mind, and it's exquisite in every sense of the word. It evokes the powerful and powerfully contrasting aspects of lust before, during, and after. So let's look a little bit more closely. But before we do, first off, if you're interested in an in-depth discussion of editorial decision-making and editorial infighting, you should get Booth's book about the sonnets and read his notes on Sonnet 129, because he goes deeply into the things that editors discuss or decisions that they make that they argue with one another. And there's a particular case that he delves deeply into, and it's pretty fascinating, if you so choose. So that's Stephen Booth's version of the sonnets. So the sonnet itself, here we have a 12-line, it's a douzaine to begin with, a douzaine with a couplet. And it's a doozy of a douzaine. It's a repetition of words that creates this beat, 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 similar to, you can figure that out yourself. It has this progression that is almost orgasmic in itself. It's got the repetition of words, this lust in action, till action, lust, action, action, lust. And then interspersed with that are these tremendously strong sounding adjectives: perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame. And then repetition again: past reason hunted, no sooner had. And this had is rhyming with hunted and hated. They both begin with the H's and the D's. Past reason hunted, no sooner had. Past reason hated, mad, mad, had, having, in quest to have, proof, proved, before, behind, well. It's just this cacophony of repetition and rhyming words with these strong sounding, vivid adjectives, and I just find it tremendously powerful. And it's also tremendously clear, and anyone who's been in the throes of lust may recognize this as a true rendition of that state. And then we get to the couplet. So, all the world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men. Well, this is unspecific men, but at least it's a gender. That leads men to this hell. So even though everyone knows the contortions and convulsions that lust puts a person through, still we're drawn to it beyond our powers, like, I guess, like a moth to a flame, or perhaps like a drag queen to Tennessee or to Florida or something like that. To our own ruin, we end up going there, even though we think we want it. And then when we get what we think we want, we no longer want it as much as we thought we did. And there's all kinds of regret and disgust. So Booth notes that in the couplet, all this the world well knows, yet none knows well. He says that the word all is often used as a code word for penis, and the word well, because it's a cavity, is also used for a vagina or a receptive sexual organ, which could also be the anus, I suppose. So do we have the presence of a gender here? Well, as I said, no honks, because in the last line, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell, it appears that he's talking about, that the narrator is identifying with this, with men, but it's not certain. So, and also men could be mankind. It's not really specific. It's not clear that he's talking about a woman as the subject. So I'm saying no gender specified. Dramatically, the critics, Edmondson and Wells and Booth and other people, say that there are similar instances of this lustfulness in Hamlet, in Timon of Athens, and in King Lear. You can look that up for yourself. Narratively, if we are following a narrative progression, and we are, these two sonnets could both be about the narrator's new beloved, which we heard about in Sonnet 127, which is a mistress or a woman, and not a master mistress like the kind that we saw in Sonnet 20, a mistress. So it could be. But also, if we are following a progression through the sonnets, we can't just ignore the first 126 sonnets. So to me, 129 sounds like it could be a scenario where there's some backsliding to a previous lover. You know, I've met this new beautiful woman. She's got dark hair and dark eyes. She's wonderful. Things are going well. But I ran into my ex, and yikes, the chemistry, the passion, everything that I had with him before rose up, so to speak. And now, what have I done? Regret, shame, disgust. 129 does not sound like the normal physical escalation of a love relationship. If we look at what might be considered a physical escalation of a love relationship, we could look at sonnets 24, 25, and 26, even though that's a physical escalation in subtext. And sonnet 26, or actually sonnet 20, with the master mistress who is, you know, pricked out for women's pleasures, that's a little bit more specific, and it's more playful and it's more fun, and it sounds like the logical progression of a love relationship into a more physical embrace of that relationship. Now, if you are of the sort who says, I'm reading this as a logical progression, so I've read 127, which is about a mistress, and so I'm saying that all the sonnets that follow are about this mistress, that follow 127. All of them are about this mistress, and I find sonnet 129 misogynistic because it's this disgust of sexuality. It's this portraying of a powerful vixen who bewitches and enslaves the narrator with her disgusting but irresistible sexuality. And I say, well, that's an argument. But whichever argument you go with, whichever narrative you go with, taken in isolation, 129 is an incredibly insightful depiction of lust and the regret that can occur when one indulges oneself too readily or for reasons that don't last beyond the moment. So taken as a whole, we know that life and lust doesn't always work neatly. And especially if we consider this particular narrator's history of stepping out and messing around. And so the disgust could be unrelated to this woman. The disgust could, in fact, be the narrator's disgust with himself. And it does appear to be a male narrator because he identifies with the men. But to me, this does read like a backsliding into another lover's bed, someone other than the mistress of 127. So, if you thought that you would get through with only one cocktail party vocabulary word, you would be wrong because we have another one coming up. Lust is our new cocktail party vocabulary word, and be careful how you use it. Lust did not always mean a sexual desire. As a noun, it came from the Proto-Indo-European las, L-A-S, and it meant to be eager, to be wanton, or unruly, or it meant eagerness, wantonness, or unruliness because it's a noun. And it also comes from the Proto-Germanic lustuz, L-U-S-T-U-Z. Then it made its way into Old English. And then from Old English, lust, as we know it now, L-U-S-T, came to Middle English. And I was actually talking about this with Roz at Skelly Dandling about the books because we have a buddy read of Chaucer and it appears in there. And it seems to mean not the sexual lust that we think of now, but in Middle English, lust means any source of pleasure or delight or appetite. It could be a liking for a person. It could also signify fertility. As a verb, we see it around 1200 where it meant to desire eagerly. And then it was absorbed, it was absorbing the Old English word listen, L-Y-S-T-E-N, which became list, L-I-S-T, as in Wyatt's famous poem, Whoso list to hunt, who wants to go hunting. So in Middle English, it means to please or delight. The first use of lust in the sense of sexual desire is attested to the 1520s, and it comes from the Bible, specifically from the Tyndale Bible, 1 John verse 2, lines 16 through whatever. All that is in the world, this is 1 John verse 2 in the Tyndale Bible. All that is in the world, as the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of goods, is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world vanisheth away, and the lust thereof. But he that fulfilleth the will of God abideth forever. So, leave it to the Bible to make it sexy. There you go. Lust. I really lust this cherry martini. So, we've got a new beloved, we've got some flirting, we've got sex, there may be some cheating, not quite sure what will happen next. Well, tune in next time. Same drag time, same drag channel to find out. And meanwhile, yes, you guessed it. You heard it here first. The world is full of wonder. While you're waiting for the next installment on the Sonnets, pay attention. I am Tootight Lautrec. Mwah, 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 mwah. And I'd even give you a little tongue here, but I'm not that kind of queen. Mwah.